Well, with that, we are going to do a shared screen. Obviously, you can see it in front of you now. A word of welcome. Please turn off your camera if you have not already. This PowerPoint will guide our agenda and discussion. And mute yourself, and if you haven't already, and then unmute yourself when it's time to speak, and then mute yourself when you are finished. Miguel, I was going to ask you to turn off your camera, and I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself in just a moment. Okay, so we have 45 folks on. I think it's about another 10 or so that will be joining us. I think we will have representatives of 17 COCs on the phone along with our federal partners. And I think we may have a representative from each of the 17 COCs already on the phone. So with that, I want to go ahead and familiarize yourself with the agenda. And as you can see, that agenda item number 1 is going to be an information update concerning the emergency housing voucher program, followed by a homeless count discussion with William. William, I know I see you on the phone, and Rufus, I know I see that you have joined us as well. But before we begin, just by way of introductions, just for a few of us, Miguel, I called out to you just a moment ago. You're new with the Kings Tulare COC. Just a quick word of introduction.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Miguel Perez here. I took over as new executive director for the Kings Tulare Continuum of Care as of last Tuesday. My background comes working for the Housing Authority of Tulare County. I worked for about 8 years, and I worked very closely with the COC and Michelle Smith for that. We worked on our EHP program, our MVP program, some other Section 8 vouchers that we were able to allocate, and then some other projects that we are going to be going into the Home Key program. So I'm somewhat familiar. Well, very thankful to be here.
Well, welcome. All right. With that, we're going to go ahead and begin with agenda item number 1. Please, everybody, mute yourself. There's a little noise in the background. If you could mute yourself, please. I'm pausing the noise. All right, that was, all right. Thank you, Tanya. Okay, with that, I want to go ahead with agenda item number 1, an information update concerning the emergency housing voucher program. Rufus, turning it over to you.
All right, thank you, Joe. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, Joe, thanks as always, for pulling us together as a group to talk about all things COC and otherwise. This is a good forum, and I wanted to take advantage of the opportunity today to have joined me Mina Baven. Mina is the director of the Office of Public Housing in the Los Angeles field office. And she and I, working collaboratively, just as you and the PHAs are trying to stand up and make the EHV program a success. And thus far, we're enjoying successes across the board. Yes, there have been some hiccups, but through your work as a COC lead agency and with some of your partner agencies, you've started to work very well with the PHAs and helping them begin to sow the seeds of success by providing them the referrals that they need in order to issue the EHV vouchers. With that, I'm going to ask my colleague, Mina Baven, to also share some insight with you from the public housing side, which is carrying a lot of the freight on this initiative. So Mina, please. Mina, I'm sorry.
All right, thanks, Rufus, and hello, everyone. Thanks for allowing me to, I mean, I'm pleased to join you all. As you all know, the EHV program definitely, you know, the success of the program is going to depend on collaboration of our PHAs with all of you and to successfully implement the EHV program. And as many of you know, the American Rescue Plan, you know, appropriated $5 billion for emergency housing vouchers, which basically equated to approximately 70,000 EHVs that were awarded to 696 PHAs across the country. And in our office alone, representing the LA office, representing pretty much all of the Southern California region, you know, we received 10,000 EHVs to be administered by 35 of our public housing authorities, agencies that are partnering with 13 COCs across the Southern California region. And, you know, definitely as I started off, the key to success is going to be collaboration, and Rufus team, along with my team, you know, we've already been working with our local partners to execute the MOU successfully and continue to build partnerships. And so again, thank you for the collaboration and for the success of the program. If there's any questions, please let me or Rufus know. But
Mina, there'd only be time for one quick question if there's one for Mina.
Sure, if there's a question, I could try to answer.
Okay.
Quick question, Joe, which is any chance that our regions might get any more vouchers under that?
That is the key question that everyone wants to know. So I don't know what the deadline is. There will be a recapture of EHVs at some point that aren't being used across the country. I don't know what the plans are to then, you know, formula out that. As you all know, the formula was based on homeless kit counts. And so again, you know, based on the recapture of EHVs not being used, I would likely think that those would then be realized. But again, I don't know. I don't know if the plans for HUD to do that yet or not. It could be a possibility.
Okay. So with that, unless if you have something real quick to add, Rufus, before we go over to William.
No, I don't, Joe. Just want to say thank you for giving us the opportunity to share this time. And lastly, to very quickly say to the COC lead agencies, we've done a bit of realignment in the LA office, and over the next couple of days, for some of you, you may be outreached by both a new manager and a new CPD rep who will be servicing you at the agency. And that'll take place within the next 2 to 3 days. Thank you. And thank you, Joe. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you, Rufus. Anytime. So agenda item number 2, the 2022 homeless count. William, as you can see on your screen, as well as everyone else, that we're asking you to give us an overview where the count currently stands. Also to include concerns about COVID, and then to respond to the following questions that I will bring up, you know, at the appropriate time. And then after that, we'll have a little bit of time where I'll ask a representative from each of the COC to ask a question that pertains to all COCs, to ask William a question that pertains to all COCs. So, William.
All right. Thanks, Joe. Before Mina leaves, I just want to thank her. Not every area has as much coordination on EHV as you are getting here in Southern California. And that I don't want that to be lost on everyone. That's a really important partnership that others are kind of screaming for. So thanks to Mina and her team.
I'm at a meeting right now. You couldn't tell from the screen. Multitasking. No worries.
Hey.
All right. I'll jump into the count update.
Thanks, William.
by way of update for the count, so as of right now, we are expecting to conduct a 2022 count. We are anticipating all communities will do it. We're not forcing it, although you can see through the NOFA that we certainly are incentivizing it. And I think for local reasons, I think it would be hard for a community not to do a count. Many of you didn't do a count last year, so actually you will be forced to do it this year with some caveats I'll mention in a moment. But if you didn't do a count last year, full count, you should absolutely count on doing one this year. That will fall into place. We don't, at this point, anticipate doing any kind of general waiver like we did last year. We are talking with National Healthcare for the Homeless and CDC and kind of thinking through the COVID situation, right? Nobody actually knows what's happening right now. The trajectory in terms of COVID positive rates is down and looking like it will go down, but we all know that could change in weeks or months, and predicting January is impossible. So because of where we are now, we are just going to count on it going forward and anticipate that we will be doing a count. A couple of things to notice there. So we are working on a new notice or an updated notice. Most of the notice stuff will stay in place, but there are a couple things that we'll address in the notice. We'll make some mention of tribes, right? That's going to be a very real part of the next couple of years, figuring out the interaction between tribes and COCs. It's going to be important, so we'll make reference to that. EHV, while it is not required to enter EHV data into HMIS, we are requiring EHV to be included in the HIC. So you should anticipate now that you will need to report on that. You'll note, if you've seen already, when people ask how to set up those projects, we do have some guidance already. And we're generally saying you should be setting it up as other permanent housing, one of the two other permanent housing project types, even if you're just doing the project descriptor data elements and not really collecting other data. We have gotten some strong pushback from some communities who want to set it up as permanent supportive housing. This is what we've said, and there's implications all the way through everything else we do. If you report it as other permanent housing, we are going to do our best to stand very strongly next to this. You don't have to have it in HMIS, and carry that through in all sense of the word, right? So one of the fears folks have, and rightly have, is, are you going to say it's not required, but then in some other mechanism going to require it, specifically on the HMIS bed coverage side. At this point, while we're going to require reporting on the HIC, we really don't anticipate requiring it even on the HMIS bed coverage side. But if you report it as PSH, it will need to be part of your HMIS bed coverage. And the large reason is because it ties to so many other reports that you do. Most importantly is the LSA, but certainly the system performance measures. So we tried to say, put it as other permanent housing because it gives us a way out of forcing you down the roads of the other reports, and can easily say you don't have to do HMIS bed coverage issues, or you won't have HMIS bed coverage issues with it. So I just want to flag that. I don't think most people have argued with this other permanent housing piece, but again, we've had a handful who have very strongly pushed back on that, and that's been our stance. We are trying to flesh out in the notice as well a couple of other situations that commonly come up. I think this group, we've talked about several of them, right? We'll talk in a little bit about RVs. So we're trying to put some RV language in. Things like tiny homes and the variety of alternate shelter scenarios. I was in a conversation with our council today on that. It's not clear what guidance we're going to be allowed to say. I have proposed guidance there. That actually is the very last issue we have to resolve. Once that's resolved, the notice will be ready to publish. So we're just working with them on what we're allowed to do here. There are some guiding principles we've used in the past, and that we want our council to sign off on that and be able to put it in the notice. So we'll see if those make it in the notice, but they should be very helpful. There will be a little bit new stuff there anyways. We try to address some things like tents, again, cars, RVs. Not a ton of depth, but certainly touch on things. With the counts happening in 2022 and most, if not all, COCs doing it then, if I were you as a COC and kind of trying to guess what's the on year, what's the off year, we're essentially going to do a restart with even years. So most of you at this point actually do counts every single year. If you don't, though, I would count on using the odd years for your off count, or where you don't do one. That actually lines up well with other things like census. I'm already talking with the census about the 2030 counts. So that helps with some of that conversation also. We put out a few new resources in regards to counting. I think it was maybe 2 weeks ago, we put out a sampling tool. There have been a lot of questions around how to do sampling, and then I'm more worried about the questions I'm not getting, but the data I'm seeing. There's lots of things that people don't understand about sampling. So it took us a while to kind of loop around to how to do a tool that might get at this. It's a good idea, if you haven't looked at that, to at least open it, get a sense for what that tool does. It'll help you set up a sampling regime up front, or if you already have one, it'll help you do estimates on the back end to try to do stratification and building that into building a stronger estimate and a more consistent one. So I know that'll get to one of the questions we have later, but I'll touch on it briefly here. One of our concerns is folks talk about change in like volunteers and how that impacts the count. While that's always going to be true to some extent, I think a lot of that can be mitigated with a strong sampling strategy, right? Because more volunteers typically allows you a deeper penetration into more areas. Well, if you sample appropriately for all of the areas, then more volunteers gives a kind of added assurance, but it shouldn't alter the nature of your count drastically from year to year. So again, we're hopeful that this kind of sampling tool will assist even when there's volunteer variability over time. It'll make that a little more even keel for folks, which is really important. I think I'll stop there. I think those are the main things going on. And Joe, you had a series of questions.
Yes, here they are, William, coming right up. Number 1 and number 2.
All right. Is there a possibility to do a partial sampling of your area in case that we don't have enough volunteers? So I partially touched on that there, right? Technically, that's always available. You always have to report your count at the entire COC level, right? So it's always a COC level count. The amount of areas you count in your counts, well, that's going to vary from year to year depending on who's at play, volunteers and whatnot. So a good plug for using that resource or some other methodology that allows you to account for every area, and that should mitigate the impact from volunteer variance from year to year. So again, plug for that tool. The second question, what about counting vehicles and what about the use of a multiplier? So this is no different than what we talked about in the past couple calls around this. You can extrapolate when it comes to counting vehicles, but you can't do that unless you've already derived a sample based on talking to people in those vehicles, right? You just have no idea about who is homeless, the nature of that homelessness, right? Is it one person? Is it multiple people? You can't possibly know that without knocking on a few doors and finding out some information. So a multiplier, you could have a multiplier, but it would be based on your own sample to determine what that looks like. And if I were you, you kind of have 2 layers that you adjust, right? You would, if you had 100 cars you counted and you were able to talk to 10 people in those cars, you're going to adjust for how many of those people said, no, I'm actually not homeless. So that's your first piece, is figure out that factor and adjust all 100 by the, well, it turns out 70% of those folks actually are not homeless. And then at that point, you'll run the layer of, well, how many people were in those vehicles? So it is possible, again, to use that kind of multiplier, but only if you've done the work in figuring out who's in those vehicles in the first place.
Hey, William, I'm going to ask Tamara, and I know that you were working with San Diego in the past about the multiplier, and then I want to ask Tina from LA too. I know that counting vehicles and the use of multiplier is important, so I can imagine that they have some things to add at the moment. Tamara?
Thank you, Joe. We actually haven't used a multiplier for a number of years. We do a kind of the methodology that we don't count vehicles, we count people. So if we see a vehicle that we think may have a homeless individual trying to knock and talk, or identify it and return maybe later in the day, and also trying to at least identify that, you know, if there are individuals there, not just stuff. We also do a similar approach on the RV. So I think the RV guidance will be really helpful, William, but I think, you know, we've really stepped back quite a bit from a multiplier to a purposeful approach. If you are counting people in vehicles, trying to talk to them or see an individual before you count someone in a vehicle. And I think the conversation with the individuals has been really helpful for us.
So Tina, Clementina, LA?
Yes, hi. Hi, William. Yeah, so for LA, we still continue to utilize the multiplier and do count vehicles, RVs, vans, etc. So we get that information through the demographic survey process. So, part of the question is whether individuals are staying in any of these dwellings, and if so, how many individuals are staying with them. So then we utilize that information to come up with the multiplier. We're continuing to use that methodology for 2022.
William, back to you. About vehicles and multiplier, anything else to add?
So what Tamara shared is ideal, right? It's ideal to be able to engage folks in vehicles. I think Los Angeles is a good example of that. Sheer volume may make it so you can't do that. Although I would say something to check, Tina, and you probably already have this in there, but it is that issue of if you're going to count vehicles, you also have that first factor of how do you discount the vehicles that don't in fact have homeless people in them, or when you talk to them, they turn out they're not homeless or empty, right? If they're empty on the night of the count, we would just count them as not homeless. That's a tough factor to get when you just have a number of vehicles in front of you. So I'm not sure that you can get that out of the sampling approach that you have, but you might be able to. But something you'll definitely want to consider, because it'll overinflate your count if you're not able to adjust for that.
So I'm going to stop us on this at the moment, because as you can imagine, we can take the rest of our time just talking about counting vehicles and the use of a multiplier. So William, the next couple questions, there they are.
Yes. So why did we include the two questions? I think that answers its own. Like, the why is, well, because we want you to do it. And there's no better way to do it than to say, hey, you will get points if you do it, and you won't get points if you don't. So all of that is just steering people in the direction we want them to go.
And that ties into a comment that you made earlier about saying that we won't be saying that you have to do an unsheltered count every odd number year. We're going to be switching over that everybody will be required to do an unsheltered count every even number year, correct?
Yep.
Okay, so we would get 3 points for that as well. Then the next question 4.
So the question is, what does HUD mean by the following two statements in the NOFO? And it's focused on, well, it's really saying we're going to look at the shelter counts. All this is doing is saying we know that either you didn't do an unsheltered count, or if you did one, it likely has some issues, and not that it's going to look different from last year. So we're just going to ignore that for this year. And we're going to focus on the shelter data. The shelter data, I will tell you, is fascinating. I have been reviewing that. I don't know when we'll finally publish it, but it is in many ways surprising given the amount of resources out there. So that's, I had expected everyone would like to gain some points off of just comparing shelter from one year to the next, but that might not be the case. There wasn't a level of increase that I would have expected. In many areas, it was actually a decrease. And so Some of that has to do with shelter decompression. A lot of it has to do with where and how NCS came online. So a lot of interesting factors there. But this is all about that concession that, there's no value in us looking at unsheltered data this year. And it's really low in points, right? You guys have seen in the past the pit count crossing several questions at a ton of weight. Well, this year it has 1 point. I think that's what the NOFA says. It's pretty low.
So, and then, William, with letter B about plans to measure sheltered and unsheltered populations in 2022, one of the reasons of putting this in is because it seems to suggest that next year, the 2022 NOFA would have all those points. You know, historically, you had up to 40 points in the consolidated application related to whether if your homeless count decreased or not in certain categories, and then you got all these points up to, I think it's as many as 40. And then it seems like this is suggesting that you have plans to measure sheltered and unsheltered populations in 2022. And so if we have the 22 NOFA in front of us, you know, maybe there's all these points tied to that again. And if you didn't do a count in 22, you would be left with what? Measuring your 2019 count, comparing it to your 2017 count or something like that?
Yeah, my head doesn't want to go to what we'll have to deal with if there's not a count, but yeah, these are very strong incentives. I can't tell you how many points in the future there will be. I actually have no idea what we'll end up doing, but you can rest assured that there will be a heavy emphasis on what we see in that 2022 count, certainly more than the 1 point you're seeing this year. So it's, yeah.
And just real quick, I know that in Southern California, that historically an annual unsheltered count was done by 11 out of the 13 COCs, and SLO, San Luis Obispo, and Orange County were only doing it every other year. But this year, Orange County and San Luis Obispo, right, Laurel, are doing a unsheltered count. So you have all 13 in Southern California. Now, just a real quick shout out, you know, Doreen, I know on Fresno, Madera, are you guys planning on doing the unsheltered counting this coming January?
Yes, this is Jody. Yes,
Okay.
we are.
Oh, Jody, yeah. Hey, Jody. Miguel, King Solari. You plan on doing one?
Joe, I can speak to that. This is Laura Fisher. I'm the program manager.
Oh,
for
hey,
the
Laura, I didn't see your
Homeless
name. I was
Alliance.
wondering if you were
Hi.
on. Yeah.
I'm here. Yes,
Yeah.
we are planning to do an unsheltered count this year, or in 2022.
Okay, and so for the three counties, Alpine, Inyo, and Mono, Topa, is that how you pronounce your first name? Did I say that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, Larry's not on the call, so asking, are you guys planning on doing an unsheltered count?
I believe so, but I just started my position, so I'm just kind of learning everything. So I'm not sure what our plans are on that right now.
Okay, and Roxanne, I don't know, on Monterey, San Benito. I'm scrolling up and down, seeing if she was on the call here.
I am. Hello, everybody. Yes, we are going to be doing a 2022 count, and we're just trying to figure out how to do it under the circumstances. That's all.
Okay, so you got, it looks like you'll have 17 out of 17, William, in concerning us. So the next question, the last one, before we go to other questions from COC leaders, William, question number 5 on the screen.
Right. Are youth in YCB host homes, costs for which considered support services included in the PIT as sheltered, or are they not counted because they're permanent homes? So it actually depends. There's not a straight answer for this because we see tons of variation on the model, even within YHDP. So if you are a YHDP grantee, and I know we at least have one on the phone, San Diego, and Los Angeles will be one in the future. Congratulations. Yeah, we'll just have to look at the circumstance, and that's one where I'd send the question in. For the most part, we see them as a form of rapid rehousing, but again, that's not uniform. It just depends.
And so, William, Pat Leslie was the one that wrote this question. Pat, don't say anything now, but how about if you correspond with, do a follow-up with William via email, and then we'll share it with everybody, just to kind of flesh this out a little bit more. Pat, William, flesh it out a little bit more then?
Sounds good.
Okay, Lynn. All right, other questions from COC leaders for William. And Tina, I'm kind of going with those of us that have larger populations, but hey, you know, Kim, Santa Barbara, Terra, Ventura, we're going to get out to you guys in just a minute. Deb, I know you're on from Kern County. So Tina, anything else for William real quick?
Yes, I just wanted to confirm what guidance HUD will be providing regarding the pandemic. Specifically, we were wondering if HUD is or was planning on asking information related to COVID and its impact. Just want to make sure that if it is going to be asked, that we have that question in our demographic survey.
Great question. No, we're not going to add any new questions at this point. As far as I have seen in the notice, no proposal to do that.
Okay, Tamara or Lahela, San Diego. Either one of you, quick question?
William, maybe it's a little bit of a comment and a question. With all of the new funding that's come out, now the emergency housing vouchers and potentially more, there's a pretty heavy burden on COC's HMIS staff to develop all of these new programs, reporting requirements now for, number of years. But our HMIS grants have remained flat. Is there going to be any opportunity down the road to increase support for continuums of care who haven't got funding for all of this increased, expectation, report outs, and the lift on HMIS?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you look at at the HUD FY22 President's budget, right, our congressional justification, which I'm sure all of you have pored over and memorized, that document actually has a request for $316 million above what we asked for, or above our renewal demand, just in the category of there's about 4 parts to this category. But one of the things, part of that $316 million would be to increase HMIS budgets. Another would focus on coordinated entry. Another would focus on street outreach, and another would focus on supportive service connections with mainstream housing, which you could quickly read between the lines, a connection between this and EHV. So I can't promise you where that's going to go, but we hear you loud and clear, and we've made our request that that type of funding be provided and try to tie it to these resources, though quite frankly, if none of these resources were out, the burden that's been attached to these programs over the last couple of years is enough to make that request. So, yeah, we'll do what we can on that one and look forward to support up on the Hill for that as well.
And just to follow up, Joe, I think it's important that we as COCs, where we can advocate for this, I'm just going to add a little bit to what William said, that we are advocating for it because it's in there somewhere, but you need to know what we're advocating for. And I think we can show the added expectation, burden, and outcomes that are required through the data and the support.
Okay, then. All right, Tamara, we'll move on to, there's a quick question, Roxanne, Monterey, San Benito, you were just saying about, can we count over 2 days? And the answer is yes, William, right? With a couple little caveats.
Yeah, I mean, the real biggest caveat is, are you doing an interview? If you are, then yeah, you can count actually up to 7 days. If you're just doing an observation count, generally no. Though there are some exceptions we can explore if needs be.
And the survey base means the unique identifier, correct? Creating that. Yeah.
Well, at least, yeah, right. Generally, we think it's the larger survey that would include all the elements required.
William? Oh, no.
Yep. Did you hear my response there?
No, we lost you for a few seconds.
Yep. I was just saying, yes, the interview is the key there, and it's yes, the deduplication factor is a key. You're likely going to interview to all of the factors at that point, though. But we can explore. If you're not doing an interview in your count, Roxanne, then that's something we'll just have to talk a little bit further about.
Okay, because I want to keep us down. We got about 20 minutes left before we switch over to Helene. So go next to Zolima, Orange County, and then Tanya, Riverside, COC. So Zolima, Orange County.
Thank you, Joe. I don't have any questions specifically.
Okay, okay. Tanya, Riverside.
Hi, Joe.
Or
Hi,
Laura. Yeah.
Hi, Joe. Hi, William. I think our question mainly focuses on the points around the decreases to the sheltered count. I just want to make sure I understood that correctly, that the HUD, right, that we would be measured based on the sheltered count this year. And the reason I guess I'm stressing that is this year, like other communities in California, we launched Project Roomkey, and we saw a 26% increase in the number of sheltered individuals in comparison to previous years. And we feel good about that because we've been able to already connect a lot of those participants to permanent housing. So I just wanted to see if you could expand on that, just so I can make sure that, you know, we're sort of keeping in mind how we answer that question on the application.
Yeah, well, to be honest, there's nothing you'll answer on that part of the application. We're literally just looking at the data. And so for that, though, we do we'll exclusively look at your sheltered counts and the impacts that has. So the selection criteria in the statute in section 427 talks about required reductions in homelessness. So that's what we'll have to measure. It's, did you show reductions? And our only touch point this year will be in the sheltered count. So again, that's knowing all of these factors are in play is a big reason why it's only 1 point. We actually have no choice but to have some points tied to it. So we just minimize the impact as much as we could.
Okay, thank you, William, and that, Tanya. So Mike, San Bernardino, COC.
Good afternoon.
Quick question, Mike? Yeah.
No questions from our side. Appreciate all your time.
Okay, so before we go over to Ventura and Santa Barbara and SLO and Kern and a few others, real quick on the cities, scrolling down. So Jenny, Pasadena, quick question. I don't know if Jenny,
I'm sorry,
I see that you.
I lost it.
Okay.
I did not have a question. Did you have a question for me?
No, I just wondered if you had something for William. So.
Oh, I see. No, I don't. No, thank you.
Okay. Phil, Glendale, I see you're on the call.
Yes, thanks. No question from me.
Okay, Paul, Long Beach.
Questions for me.
Okay, so then why don't we go to Ventura, Tara?
Hi, Joe. Hi, William. I just wanted to ask if there would be any additional updated guidance related to using mobile apps or online survey tools. Any concerns or updates around that? I'm assuming that we've been doing that for a few years now, so just wanted to confirm.
No updated guidance in the plans. Strangely, the document we put out, I don't know, maybe 4 years ago after we did the beta test, we don't really have different set of feedback. It's a lot of confirming the same things we see there. I think the catch for the mobile apps, and we've seen a lot of success there, but the catch is like finding one that works for your community that you can also afford, because some of them certainly are expensive and others potentially are not, depending on how you're getting them funded through your county usually.
Right. Okay. We're thinking about transitioning to using our county's Esri, GIS system for better mapping and resources. So, and already have that. So it wouldn't be necessarily, it actually would be more affordable since we are a county. So, okay. Thank you so much. Thanks for the guidance and the updates. Appreciate it.
Kim, Santa Barbara.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, a couple quick questions. Can HUD provide additional guidance on how tiny homes or dwelling units are to be included in the HIC? And William, there was talk of an unsheltered NOFO pre-COVID, and it seems like it got lost in the shuffle. Is that still coming?
Let's see. So let me take the tiny home one first. So I will say that the tiny home question was like the crux of our discussion with council today. I'm hoping to be able to say some things in the guidance in the notice that we put out. We'll see, because that's the thing that they were a little hung up on. So my goal is to, though, because tiny homes have several layers in how you can look at them, and we would like to approach it from a first, could you count them as shelter, and then add the layer of, well, if they're at least shelter, are they ever permanent housing as well, which is a whole nother layer. So we'll see what makes it in the notice, but certainly exploring that. The unsheltered NOFO is absolutely in people's minds. We are moving forward. Our concern right now is COC capacity, right? Can you imagine taking on another NOFO, something that you're not going to be able to just refresh a lot from last year, but this is all new, different partnerships. It's going to be a little bit of work. So we're just kind of biding our time a little bit, trying to take some lessons learned from COVID as well in the unsheltered space. But it is moving along. We had discussions in the last week or so about various criteria, and it is moving up the chain.
Okay. Laurel.
Thank you.
San Luis Obispo.
Hi, Joe. So George and I wanted to check back in with William just about timing of the pit count. And obviously with COVID, last year, January was peak time, and, hopefully the vaccines will help, but there's also some evidence that folks are going to need boosters to avoid breakthrough. So I know that we just had a meeting with our data folks this week who are working on the pit count, and they were kind of hoping that we'd be able to move it back a little bit to, February, March, when it's less likely there's going to be a huge spike. But anyway, I guess I was just going to say, William, that based on what we saw last year, communities typically see spikes starting after about 2 weeks after Thanksgiving. So that might be a good time to kind of really look at that with CDC and others to see which direction it's trending. But the truth is too that the biggest spikes generally occur about 2 weeks after Christmas. And so hopefully we can be in conversation with you all, just as all of our EOCs and public health agencies are monitoring all of this and be able to move kind of quickly if we do need to move it due to spikes. And there may be some regional differences as well. So maybe working with some of the CDC or other folks to maybe come up with some criteria if your hospitalizations are over a certain rate or something, or at least just plan to have a follow-up. Maybe the HUD Friday office hours or something, but let us know come January what it's looking like and how we might need to go about requesting a change in date if needed.
Yep, so that's exactly the type of conversation we're going to be having with CDC and National Healthcare for the Homeless. I will say you can request an exception to the date now. You can request it to go to February. The one rub there is that's only a request to change the dates of the count. It doesn't change your submission timeline. For some COCs, that actually doesn't matter, right? They don't need the extra month to collect their data. So typically we wouldn't push it out like a week. We'd push it out a month for most of those PID counts that move out. And if you want to do it in February, if most of your conditions are about the same as January, which in California it often is, it's ideal to do it at the end of the month. That's when most like rent checks and other subsidies and other, right, like both bills start to pile in and assistance kind of flows out. So that's the only thing to consider, but that's in the notice that's already published, and we're not going to change the guidance there. You can request the exception. It'll actually go through a different email box, but it'll be requesting the exception, providing cause. So if that's something you already want to anticipate and you don't want to have to wonder what's going to happen in January, you can push it to February. And again, just know you'll probably have to submit your data by April 30th. But we are looking at like the types of factors that should be considered. What I think will happen, unlike last year, where we provided exceptions to the counts altogether, we probably will look at doing, again, maybe head counts in those areas where it's more difficult to do. We'll run some kind of traps before we just say no count at all in spite of COVID. So that's the type of discussion we'll have with CDC.
Okay. We're okay on that then. There's still a few more COCs and we have about 10 minutes before we switch over to Helene. So with that, Deb, Kern County COC. Deb?
Thank you. I don't have any questions at this time.
All right. How about Madera, Fresno, Doreen, Jody?
Yeah, I just have one question, William. Why NOFO? What prompted that? I just have to know.
That's a great question. I wish I had the answer. I think we were forced by some audit or something. Yeah, we don't love it either.
Just curious.
Okay. So how about Kings Tulare? Laura or Miguel?
We don't have any questions on our end. William did a good job of answering our concerns. Thank you.
Okay. And Topa, I know we never met. Just exchange anything for your Tri-County COC? Any questions
No
for
questions
William?
at this time. Thank you.
Okay. And Paula, I know you thought I forgot you in Imperial, and I did, and shame on me. Paula,
No problem, Joe.
All right,
no,
you still
Joe,
love
we don't
me?
have any
Okay.
questions.
All right.
We do.
All right. Okay. So with that, I just kind of scrolling down a little bit. Jeanette, Senator Feinstein's office. Jeanette, you're still with us, right? Any quick word, something you want to say, add? Jeanette? Okay, maybe you'll come back to her. No? Jeanette? Okay. With that then, George, did you something that you noted in the chat?
Hey, Joe. Yeah, one of the questions that came up from part of our planning group was reaching out to some of the COCs that did conduct a full count this year to get any like best practices, lessons learned from doing the count during COVID.
William?
I wasn't sure if that was a question for me or the other communities here. We have Kern did a count. I think we might have one other on the call here. The things that I saw was that, as with your normal count, street outreach makes all the difference. If you don't have street outreach, you don't really have a count. That's most important in the COVID context. We found that doing counts over longer days did like we allowed the counting up to 14 days. That was something that seems like it would be helpful on the surface, and not a whole lot of communities found that terribly helpful because there's still time and staff and recall issue, right? Like it just results in issues. So it didn't turn out to be as helpful as anticipated. And we also found that sampling, again, was helpful for folks. They were able to learn a little more about how to do that and what that meant. So I think those are the biggest lessons learned. I will say many of the communities that used an alternate data set, there were not many total. I think we had about 20. They generally had to use some other action as well, like engaging street outreach. And so it's hard to see a scenario where communities are going to be doing purely counts out of like HMIS or the coordinated entry data or whatever. I know we've seen a lot of questions about that, but it's not really something that's likely going to be a big thing or very possible in the future. So just in case folks are wondering what direction that's going, that this count didn't put a lot of favor in that, although it showed that there's definitely a good possibility of intersecting the counts with data that already exists.
Okay, so, sometimes we have state representatives from BCSH, HCD on the call with us, and I see some call-in users, and it's generally those. So if we have any state folks, I know, Amber, I don't know if you were on the call or not. You said you were tentative. I don't know if anyone from the state wants to just unmute themselves and jump in with a comment or a question. Any of our state reps, our state partners? Anybody? Okay. So with that then, we're going to just switch over in a few minutes to Helene. So William, anything else to add or say? I had one quick question when you were saying that the tiny homes is holding up, dealing with the tiny homes issues is holding up the release of the guidance. When would we expect that, for it to be released? Do you have any idea?
Nope. Again, that's the last issue. We literally resolved everything else today. So I'm hoping that's not going to take long. But in my experience, trying to predict when council approves something is like using a crystal ball, and you just don't know what you're going to get. So I'm hopeful, though. Hopefully, my best guess would be next week if they can clear it real fast, which it's not a huge issue. We actually have some headway on this one. So I'm hoping next week, but it could be, 3 weeks. So we'll see.
Okay, anything else you want to add before we switch over to Helene? William?
Nope, just thanks to everyone. Looking forward to the conversation with Helene.
Okay, with that then, Helene, we're going to switch over to you and you can become the presenter. And I see Bev is also on the phone. Hey, Bev.
Hello.
Helene, Bev, we're going to switch over to you. So I think I have to unshare my screen before stop sharing my screen. And Helene, you're going to take over. Bev?
I'm sorry, can you hear me now? I was on mute, sorry. Hi, everybody.
Yes.
It's great. And Bev is here. She is my note taker. It's great to hear everybody. We only have half an hour, and I really appreciate, Joe, thank you so much on giving me this time to do this. And I need to share my screen. How am I going to do this? Let's see. I've never done it on this one before. Screen 2. There. Oh, look at that. There it is.
Wow,
You can see.
You're a pro.
All right. So So you all are really aware and involved and connected with USICH in a great way. So normally I would take 15 to 20 minutes to go through a bunch of slides, and we're not going to do that. We're just going to go right into some questions. But just to give a little bit of content here is, I do want to just mention a couple things. As you all know, we put together federal strategic plans. We've done so since 2010. We've had opening doors at Home Together. We had expanding the toolbox. Expanding the toolbox right now is not an active strategic plan, so we are acting without one, and that's why we want to get one going quickly. And I just want to put right up front what our full basics of where we're starting from. So as you can see on the screen here, these are things we know we're going to do as part of this federal strategic plan. It's how we're going to do it. How can we be successful doing these things that we want to know? So you don't need to tell us that we need to focus on racial equity. We all know that. It's a hard piece to do. We need to figure out how to do it. Same with evidence-based practice, focusing on a housing first model as a successful evidence-based practice. And, you know, figuring out how to align strategies with emerging federal, state, and local priorities, how to address areas in need of greater attention, and how to reflect evolving practices. So just to give a little bit of context there, I'm going to skip all these slides. You know the numbers. We know that unsheltered homelessness is a big, big deal, especially in California. It's actually the first time we saw in 2020, and this was pre-COVID, where the number of unsheltered individuals experiencing homeless were more than the people who are experiencing sheltered homelessness. So we know this is of concern. We know that is a huge concern in California. And we know elements that make things work, right? Looking at veteran homelessness over time, we've seen a 50% reduction between 2010 and 2020. And as you can see on the screen, the various types of things that we all talk about on a regular basis that can make it work. How can we make it work with other populations? And then where do we go from here? How do we incorporate everything we've learned with COVID? How do we handle unsheltered homelessness, as I've mentioned? How do we really look at systematic change as it deals with racial injustice and and the health and housing outcomes, both that we learned from COVID, but also how does that impact people of color and underrepresented groups? And then how do we leverage all this money that's coming in, and especially in California too, with state funding as well that we've never seen before. So we have 6 questions. The last one is what did we miss? So it's kind of the kitchen sink question. And so we want to hear from you on a variety of issues. Please feel free to use the chat if you'd like to add comments, or just let me know. I don't know if I can see raised hands in this format or not, but this is a small enough group that if you just want to go through and speak out, that would be fine too. So just to start off with the first question, what should the federal government's top priorities be as they relate to preventing and ending homelessness? We'll just start at the top. Oh, come on, this is not a quiet group. Feel free to speak up.
Hi, Helene, this is Tara.
Hey, Tara.
I was just going to say, I put in the chat, but I think one of the gaps we are seeing is availability of project-based vouchers to help with operational subsidies. And I know, there's some home ARP funding and some other sources, but that is an ongoing gap to help us quickly develop new PSH, especially as we're trying to leverage HomeKey.
And Bev, several of us in the chat said permanent supportive housing.
Yeah, so Laurel saw that too, and increasing funding for services. Yeah, and Mike put that in agreement on PVVs from Roxanne. Thank you. What else? What should be the top priorities for us?
I would argue that we need some funding for either acquisition or rehabilitation of units. There's a lot of assistance out there, but no units that are available to utilize that assistance.
Great. We're hearing that a lot from many other areas.
Yeah, This is Jessica from Los Angeles. Just to piggyback on that, I think from my understanding, the sort of East Coast, eastern part of the U.S., which has a lot of the older permanent housing stock, has sort of old, more decaying stock. Here on the West Coast, didn't have as much of an investment, just given the later development of the region. But I do think that some of the models and the project-based housing we know is in really bad shape and doesn't really appeal to the population that we're trying to offer housing. Especially, I'm not sure for other COCs, but here in LA for SROs, single room occupancies, we're finding that it's not really beneficial for highly acute population. So if we're dedicating 100% of our permanent supportive housing, that includes single room occupancies, we're finding that that model isn't really great for highly acute individuals. So how do we think about the sort of legacy structures that we have and maximizing those for the population?
Great, thank you. Tara wrote in the chat, I think federal partners should review policies and eligibility for programs and services through the racial equity lens, right? And Laurel also Medicaid, Medicare funding for skilled nursing facilities, and particularly those facilities that take people with serious mental issues. Yeah, EHV should be eligible to be project-based from Miguel. Thanks, Miguel. Mike, Clementina, we use apps for PITC, oh, this PIT count stuff, right? Okay. That's a good count. Anything else on this question? Okay. Next one. So you've mentioned this kind of, right? But the top priorities by meeting the barriers. But if there are any, just want to dig a little deeper here. What are the biggest barriers to ending homelessness in the communities your agency organizations serve? Housing, yes, Tara. I hear you there. What else?
I mean, Mike with San Bernardino, I would just say from our standpoint, just outreach and all, is definitely capacity. So whatever it might be, housing, shelters, whatever, that's definitely the biggest hurdle in our area.
Great. Thank you. Ongoing services funding for housing. Thanks, Kimberly. What other barriers?
Hey, Helene, this is Joe. I just wanted to, one word for question 2 and going back to question number 1, encampments. I mean, it's just, even with number 2, the biggest barriers to ending homelessness in your communities. I mean, it's tearing communities, neighborhoods apart, cities apart. These encampments that are, at least out here, that are growing and growing and growing.
So meaning the priority should be addressing encampments in some way, like that
yes,
has a priority.
Going back to number 1, but then also it becomes a barrier, in trying to end homelessness in your community.
Great. Kimberly, also keeping pace with the soaring rental prices, right? Deb, the ability to pay for staffing at a level that matches the need of our homeless population. Laura, lack of affordable housing, lack of placements for people who need 24-hour care, insufficient street outreach resources. Water is another one, okay? More robust prevention resources. Roxanne, when you say water, are you talking like the drought and how to handle that, or was there something else about water in particular? And Paul, hi, Paul.
Sorry.
Housing. No, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Roxanne.
I was just trying to figure out how to unmute this on the phone. Well, for Monterey County, we could talk about water for a long time. The issues that we're dealing with is there's a lot of people who don't actually live in Monterey County, and they have very, very large homes and lots of water credits. So I just feel like this is not a HUD thing, but there has to be some way for us to kind of reevaluate the water credits, especially for those living in California.
Great, thank you. Paul, agree with Joe. Wait, where'd it go? Agree with Joe that responding to unsheltered homelessness, how much community focus and strain is becoming extremely challenging and can distract from the programming that does make a larger impact, right? All right. And Bev is urging us on, keep them coming. Let's move on to the third question, of course, and if you think of something for the first two, that's great too. Mentioning issues related to racial equity, how can the federal government more effectively center racial equity in its prevention of or response to homelessness, and how can it best support equitable distribution of and access to resources and equitable outcomes at the local level? And Laurel, to the past one, right, having to hiring case managers, so capacity issue is a barrier. Yeah, go ahead, Miguel.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, I mean, absolutely more capacity issues as far as more funding to be able to do outreach in different languages and be able to work with subpopulations that typically are not have access to a lot of the programs that we provide.
Okay, thank you. Profile community. So meaning lift up some case studies, Kimberly. I think that's what you're saying there. I've heard some others.
Yes, Helene. Yeah, just really feeling like we need some real specifics of who's doing this well, and you know, really at a client level, what's changing.
Great, thank you. Sustainability needs a lot of funding through the CARES Act. How do we sustain these programs after 2022? Tara's talking about revisit formula funding.
Hi, this is Lahela. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, hey Lahela.
Okay. I was just going to comment about the racial equity, is that I'm wondering if there's, and maybe this is already being done, but I just think about it in the way that, you know, historically our tendency is to own everything, right? Like we become real estate people, we become all of these things. And so is there a conversation or something happening about, again, maybe how do we leverage that expertise in our colleagues or our partners, not necessarily just us as the homeless response system, carrying that load, if that makes sense? Like we can have funding for it, but we're still going to have the capacity issues of having staff who speak multiple languages, right? Or having, you know, people, you know, that they can relate to, you know, things like that. So I'm just wondering if there's a way to think of it a little bit larger than just our own system, and if that can happen maybe more at the federal level, if that makes sense, rather than us feeling like we have to solve it by, you know, just having more funding or having more staff, but how do we kind of look at that from a larger systemic approach, I guess is what I'm going for.
This is Doreen in Fresno, and I'm sorry I don't remember your name who was speaking, but thank you for that, because I would really like to touch on that point and amplify it a little bit. I do not believe that the system is responsible for the inequity in homeless response, nor are they all by themselves going to be responsible for equitable distribution. We could do equitable distribution of our assets and our resources, but it really doesn't matter if you have an African-American client who is having difficulty renting from a landlord because he's an Afro-American client, right? So I think that when you guys think about outcomes, do not put all of the outcomes just on the COCs and the homeless services providers, because this is a much wider conversation that is from both sides. It's about homeless prevention because of some of the racist practices, and then exiting homelessness successfully in light of continued racist practices.
Thanks, Doreen. Thank you. Looking at the that again. So Diana from Imperial on the past question on barriers, design programs that partner with schools and employers to ensure proper training, job placement, also include counseling services, wraparound programs. Jessica on the encampment issue, home is more than 4 walls and a roof. It's a community and connection to others. Perhaps our housing first interventions need to be viewed through that lens. Tara agrees with Jessica. We have all these rules about the number of people that can be put in a unit, length of time, length of leases, etc. And Paul, Long Beach is looking at larger systemic changes to our economy, changing policies around welfare and SSI that incentivize people increasing income, increase the minimum wage, universal versatile housing and vouchers. Tara agrees with Paul. Everyone's very agreeable. It's very nice. This is a much larger issue than the homeless response, that's for sure. And Alvin thanks to something about addressing the racial segregation and housing options and homeless services. And you're meaning the geographic racial segregation. Thank you, Alvin. Great. All amazing comments. Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, this is Roxanne again. I'm sorry if I missed it, but I really do wish that HUD will start considering allowing undocumented folks to get access to vouchers. That's a big issue in Monterey County. Sorry.
Okay. So increased access to different populations to vouchers. Okay, great. Just put the next question up. And again, we have plenty of time to wrap up others if you think of something. You did, all of you, amazing, incredible, tiring, exhausting work related to COVID-19 and the pandemic, and really highlighting how housing, health, and homelessness all interconnect with each other. What did we learn from this that we want to take forward and put into a new federal strategic plan?
Hi, Helena, this is Jenny from Pasadena. So I'll attempt to speak for, I don't know if it's all of California, but certainly our region. I gotta say, I mean, one of the successes of our huge efforts with Project Roomkey was that we didn't ask permission, you know? We just were like, wow, these people are gonna die if we don't do this. So guess what? Your local motel is going to be, you know, a non-congregate shelter for right now. And I feel like this is not really a federal policy thing, but I mean, I'm so frustrated with the NIMBYs. I know that we all are, but during the pandemic, you know, there was across many, not just communities, but sectors, et cetera, this recognition of what has always been there, that these folks are dying and are, you know, are much higher risk of dying if we don't do something. So that, I guess the short answer would be the sense of urgency, but just highlighting, you know, what wasn't exactly a by right situation, but, you know, highlighting our willingness to not tread lightly.
Yeah. And Tara's showing homelessness is an emergency. We all knew that but I think other people saw it more. That's, I think, what you're also mentioning here, the urgency component to it. Mike's mentioning hotel motel conversion, Project Roomkey type bridge housing to immediately to get people off the street. Laurel, what the state did to remove zoning and other barriers to housing development allowed projects to come online with breathtaking speed. Yeah, it's amazing how much we were able to do with the sense of urgency, the funding, the deadlines. And Laurel, that's in regard to Project Homekey, exactly. Yeah. Paul, that rapidly increasing response in a short time needs more support and focus with capacity building and training, and put a massive strain on staffing, right? See, a lot of people burnt out from the intensity of the response, right? You can take it on for so long, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. How do we make that sustainable over time, that sense of urgency and staffing and to staff up? Yep, hearing that a lot. Non-congregate shelters from Alvin are much more stabilizing and attractive to folks experiencing homelessness than congregate shelters. And Sophia's echoing Paul's comments. Yes, the whole idea of big congregate shelters, I think people are thinking differently now, right? As a public health situation, or if that's really the best type of shelter opportunity. Anything else? Okay. So this next one, and I didn't go over this in too much detail up to now, so I'll spend a little bit more time. But if you remember Opening Doors and Home Together, the other two federal strategic plans that had very specific goals on certain subpopulations, right? Opening Doors originally said we want to end chronic homelessness by 2015. And then we found that, well, we didn't have the funding that went with the goal, and there was an update that moved it to 2017. Well, we still know we haven't ended chronic homelessness yet. So, but the goal was there. It's a motivating factor. It helps us try to, you know, focus on certain subpopulations. Home Together didn't put specific dates, but it did talk about certain subpopulations like veterans and people with disabilities, families with children. So for this next plan, what do you think? Should there be a national similar goal? How specific should it be? Should it include subpopulations? Should there be a target date? What's your sense here for a national plan to come out like that? A federal plan, I should say. Timelines are critical. Kimberly, do you want to expand on that? Like, because why?
You know, I think I've seen it both ways, and I just really think that when we're all shooting for something in a specific time frame, we even just referenced it, right, with HomeKey. We're trying to build 8,000 units in 8 months. It just feels so different than just let's end chronic homelessness. And so I realize these are much bigger goals, but I still really do feel like even like House America that just came out, right? By it being a 1-year timeline, it does really create an urgency and a movement, I guess, would be my thoughts.
Great, thank you.
You know, Helene, Joe, Coletti, one quick comment, to be mindful of, you know, states, what states are saying, like in California, there's recent legislation has been signed and it's going forward to reduce homelessness by 75% in 2029, to end homelessness in 2030. You know, so whether if you're doing it at a federal level or not, it's happening at the state level, at least in California.
Okay. That's a big list, that one. Yep.
I think that really taps in on something, right? I think California is ahead of the curve in this part, you know, even though we have the biggest numbers, maybe that's why, but sort of the statewide planning and some of that movement. And so it seems like it would be great for USICH to be aligning with some of those goals.
And are we talking all homelessness, or should there be different goals for certain subpopulations? Where do people land on that?
Well, this is Joe again.
I do think it's a.
Go ahead, Kimberly, and then Joe.
Go ahead. I was just going to say that I do think subpopulations, it's, you know, we just have different levels of resources. So, you know, let's show everyone that we can end veteran homelessness, right? Because those resources I really feel like are there. So yeah, I do think having it broken down by subpopulation does assist. Not trying to pit the, you know, different subpopulations against each other, but maximizing the resources that are coming down in order to make those numbers go down quicker.
And Mike's mentioning senior homes to be a priority so we can reduce the number of people dying on our streets with no dignity. Yes, Joe, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say is that at the state level, they, as I mentioned before, there's years. I guess that's a targeted date or a targeted year. I'm not a big fan of targeted dates, perhaps even years, but a fan of subpopulation goals, because I think they can be inspiring. And we all talk about, you know, all right, it's been over 10 years when we said, hey, we're going to end veteran homelessness, right? Okay, we got halfway, but it's still inspiring. still something that we talk about and say even to this very day, right? And when you start breaking down subpopulations, not just across the country and not just by state, but by county, break them down further by city and even within the cities, all of a sudden now you got subpopulations that you could actually really end homelessness for, you know, whatever they may be, the youth in a given city, seniors in a given city, or even in a given county. And so I think there's something that can be done. And when we do it, or at least when we attempt to do it, and even if we only get halfway there, I think it's inspiring.
There are a few people who are seeing the other, some other unintended consequence, right? You end up prioritizing one group over another, right? And I think someone was mentioning earlier, you got to fund it if it's going to happen. So don't want to have competing funds related to it. However, but subpopulation goals can help motivate and maximize local focus. So, people going back and forth. We're doing the same thing, going back and forth, right? So, I think, and then Kara saying, if we want equity in here, we got to include everybody, if that's where we're coming from. And then Sophia, I think jurisdictions should be encouraged to set goals for populations as they are reflected in their own area. So need to strategize about that based on what's happening in your own area. Great, all great comments, thank you. And Jessica, the sub-pop goals to funding goals, seniors and the funding sources that support them, right? Youth, right? And the funding sources that support them. So that's where, so have the subpopulation goals, but then also show where the funding can come to get to those goals. And how the partnerships with the 19 different federal agencies can align around those goals. Yeah, so it's not just HUD, it's not just HHS, it's all 19 agencies. Good point, Jessica, thank you. What did we miss? Anything else? Or if you thought of something about another question you wanted to add? The kitchen sink question is what I call this one. Tailored approaches to needs. This is from Melanie. Rather than subpopulation. Okay, so avoid leading to silos, eligibility barriers, recognizing people have individual needs and can belong to several subpopulations any one time. That's real equity. That's true.
Hey, Helene, this is Tara again. This one's kind of a bit challenging to type, so I thought I would try to verbalize it. But I think one of the things I see, USICH and even our state now interagency council has put together some great tools about various resources and how to leverage those. And most of that information gets disseminated to COCs. And so like funding through HHS or, various funding sources that go to systems that we're not necessarily, overseeing, that those should be leveraged. And I don't feel, at least locally, that the message is getting to the counterparts that receive those funding opportunities and encouraging them to partner more. And so I think that would be really helpful if that's something that can be done at the federal and state level.
Great, thank you. Anything else?
Hello?
Hi, this is Paula with Imperial County. Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Hi. So we're relatively new as the administrative entity of the COC for the County of Imperial, but what we have seen at least is for our chronically homeless population, we have a lot of them with serious underlying issues, whether it's mental health or substance use, high acuity. I think someone talked about earlier about capacity, but on our end, what we see is that there needs to be more engagement and capacity as far as street outreach and something that's more targeted to help them. So when they are ready at that stage of change where they want to get that help, that those resources are available to that population. We have ran our Project Room Key, and what we've seen is some of the struggles that our chronically homeless population, when they're at that stage where they want the assistance for behavioral health, they encounter a lot of barriers, even with our assistance. So I cannot imagine what it's like for them to be out chronically homeless, and when they're ready to get that help, that they don't have that readily available to them. So that's been one of our significant challenges, is that capacity for street level outreach that's more intense and more targeted to assist our chronically homeless population.
Just right.
Great. Thank you. So you had, Joe, did you have a comment?
No, I didn't. I thought I heard you wrapping it up, and then I wanted just to wrap it up when you're finished. That's all.
So I am wrapping it up because we're about out of time. So yes, thank you. And thank you. Those great comments. Thank you. This is the website. It's right on our homepage, usich.gov. Right there at the top, you can click on our portal. So if you think of something else, if there's other people that you think would like to give feedback, please do so. We're gathering information through the end of November, and then we're putting together our draft. We have to go to each of the 19 different federal agencies on a clearance process, and that takes a little bit. So our aim is to get this out by next spring. But really, thank you so much. And I can stop sharing my screen.
Yeah. Thank you, Helene. So by way of thanking our presenters, I, for one, right at the bottom of our WebEx window, you see the emoji little icon right next to a record. I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to click on clapping hands, and would encourage you to do the same. Yeah, there we go, everybody. Thank you, presenters. Thank you. So with that, happy NOFOing and be well.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.